television series in American pop culture history have left a mark as enduring as Little House on the Prairie. Airing from 1974 to 1983, the series arrived at a moment when television audiences were shifting between traditional family storytelling and more modern, socially aware drama. Set in the late 19th century American frontier, it presented a world that felt both distant and familiar, where daily struggles were framed through family bonds, moral choices, and community survival. At the center of it all was Walnut Grove, a small town that became more than just a setting. It became a symbolic home for viewers who tuned in week after week. The show's appeal came from its emotional clarity. It did not rely on spectacle or fast-paced storytelling, but instead on intimate, character-driven narratives. Families gathered around their television sets to watch stories that reflected hardship, kindness, and resilience. It was television that often felt comforting, yet it was never afraid to explore painful realities. That balance between warmth and struggle helped the series transcend its historical setting and speak to audiences in the 1970s and early 1980s, a period marked by social and economic change in the United States. As its popularity grew, so did its cultural footprint. The Ingalls family became household names, and Walnut Grove became a fictional place that felt as real as any actual town. For many viewers, the series was not just entertainment but a weekly ritual, offering lessons about perseverance, morality, and human connection that resonated far beyond its frontier backdrop. Walnut Grove and the heart of the story. At the core of Little House on the Prairie was Walnut Grove, a small farming community that functioned as the emotional and narrative anchor of the series. The town was not simply a backdrop for the Ingalls family's life, it was a living ecosystem of neighbors, teachers, shopkeepers, and families whose interconnected stories created a sense of collective identity. Through its depiction, the show constructed an idealized yet grounded vision of rural life in the American Midwest during the late 1800s. The Ingalls family, particularly Charles and Caroline Ingalls and their daughters, served as the central lens through which audiences experienced Walnut Grove. Their struggles with farming, education, illness, and financial uncertainty reflected broader themes of survival and adaptation. Each episode often centered on a moral or emotional dilemma, allowing viewers to engage with questions about fairness, empathy, and responsibility. What made Walnut Grove particularly compelling was its consistency as a storytelling environment. Characters came and went, but the town itself remained a constant presence, shaping every narrative arc. Schools, churches, and small businesses formed the backbone of community life, reinforcing the idea that survival depended not only on individual strength, but also on collective cooperation. This sense of belonging helped the series maintain emotional depth across its long run. Characters, performances, and emotional connection. One of the defining strengths of Little House on the Prairie was its ensemble cast and the emotional authenticity they brought to their roles. Michael Landon, who portrayed Charles Ingalls, became a central figure both on and off screen. His performance emphasized warmth, moral steadiness, and quiet resilience, making him a symbolic representation of the ideal frontier father. Alongside him, Melissa Gilbert's portrayal of Laura Ingalls Wilder provided the audience with a coming-of-age perspective that evolved as the series progressed. The characters were written with a balance of simplicity and emotional complexity. They were not immune to flaws, nor were they portrayed as perfect moral figures. Instead, they were shaped by circumstances that forced them to confront difficult decisions. This allowed audiences to see reflections of their own lives within a historical setting, bridging the gap between the 19th century and modern sensibilities. Supporting characters, including teachers, neighbors, and antagonists, contributed to the richness of Walnut Grove. Their stories often intersected with the Ingalls family, reinforcing the interconnected nature of small-town life. Over time, viewers developed deep attachments to these characters, treating them less as fictional creations and more as familiar presences in an ongoing narrative world that felt increasingly personal and emotionally significant. Michael Landon's creative control and vision. Behind the scenes, Little House on the Prairie was shaped heavily by Michael Landon's creative influence. As star, producer, writer, and director on many episodes, Landon held an unusual level of control over a network television series. This allowed him to guide the tone, storytelling direction, and emotional framework of the show in a consistent manner, ensuring that it reflected his vision of family-centered drama. Landon's approach emphasized emotional storytelling over procedural or episodic formulas. He frequently focused on moral lessons, interpersonal conflict resolution, and emotionally driven narratives that prioritized character development. This creative control helped maintain the show's identity, but also contributed to tensions within the production environment. Balancing artistic vision with network expectations and cast dynamics was an ongoing challenge throughout the series' run. Despite these pressures, Landon's leadership helped establish a distinct identity for the show. His commitment to portraying human vulnerability and ethical complexity set Little House on the Prairie apart from many other programs of its time. However, such control also meant that creative disagreements were inevitable, particularly as the series matured and the demands of long-term storytelling began to intensify behind the scenes. The final farewell and the explosion of Walnut Grove. The end of Little House on the Prairie did not arrive quietly. Instead, it culminated in the 1984 television movie, The Last Farewell, which delivered one of the most shocking conclusions in television history. In the story, Walnut Grove faces a powerful land developer attempting to seize ownership of the town. Rather than allow their homes and community to be taken, the residents make a drastic decision. They destroy their own town using dynamite. The destruction of Walnut Grove was not just narrative, it was deeply symbolic. Iconic structures such as the schoolhouse, church, and mercantile were reduced to rubble in a dramatic sequence that left audiences stunned. For viewers who had spent nearly a decade invested in the town's life, the decision to erase it so completely felt both powerful and unsettling. The imagery of the explosion became one of television's most discussed finales. It represented finality in its most literal form, eliminating the possibility of reuse or continuation of the set. Whether interpreted as artistic closure or emotional overstatement, the moment cemented itself in television history as an ending that refused to be gentle or ambiguous. Production reality and the myth of the real explosion. Over time, stories surrounding the destruction of Walnut Grove have taken on a mythic quality, with some believing that the entire set was destroyed through uncontrolled or dangerous means. In reality, the production used controlled practical effects typical of the era, with staged demolitions designed for the camera rather than chaotic destruction. The goal was to achieve a visually dramatic conclusion that matched the emotional weight of the story. Michael Landon's decision to fully dismantle the set reflected a desire for narrative closure. Rather than allowing the town to remain standing for reuse in other productions or to decay into partial recognition, the creative team opted for a definitive end. This approach ensured that Walnut Grove would remain preserved in memory, rather than in physical remnants that might alter its legacy. The use of real physical sets, combined with practical explosives for filming, contributed to the scene's impact. Unlike modern digital effects, the destruction carried a tangible weight that audiences could immediately recognize. This realism intensified the emotional response, reinforcing the sense that a long-standing television world was truly coming to an end. Declining ratings and the decision to conclude. By the early 1980s, Little House on the Prairie was no longer experiencing the same ratings dominance it had enjoyed in earlier seasons. As audience tastes evolved and competition increased, the show gradually transitioned from a primetime staple to a series approaching the end of its natural lifespan. The network ultimately made the decision to conclude the program rather than continue extending its run indefinitely. This decision was not driven by scandal or abrupt cancellation, but by a recognition that the series had reached a natural endpoint. After nearly a decade on air, many of its central story arcs had been explored, and maintaining narrative momentum became increasingly challenging. Ending the series allowed its legacy to remain intact, rather than risk diminishing returns. Michael Landon's involvement in shaping the conclusion ensured that the series ended with creative intention rather than abrupt termination. The final movie format allowed the story to be resolved in a structured way, giving both characters and audiences a sense of closure, even if that closure came in an unexpected and dramatic form. Behind-the-scenes tensions and cast dynamics. While Little House on the Prairie is often remembered for its wholesome tone, the production environment was not without tension. Creative differences occasionally emerged between cast members and production leadership, particularly as the series progressed through multiple seasons. Michael Landon's dominant role in shaping storylines sometimes led to disagreements regarding direction, character focus, and production priorities. Cast members navigated the challenges of long-term television work, where evolving scripts and shifting character arcs could affect screen time and narrative importance. These dynamics are common in ensemble productions, especially those with extended runtimes, and Little House on the Prairie was no exception. Despite these tensions, the cast maintained a professional working relationship that allowed the series to continue successfully for years. Many of the interpersonal challenges remained behind the scenes, while the on-screen product retained its cohesive emotional tone. The contrast between production complexity and on-screen simplicity is part of what makes the show's history particularly interesting in hindsight. Personal lives and emotional ripples. Beyond professional dynamics, personal relationships among cast and crew also influenced the atmosphere surrounding the series. Michael Landon's personal life, including relationships that developed during production, became a subject of emotional strain among those involved. These developments had ripple effects within the close-knit environment of a long-running television show. For younger cast members, especially those who viewed senior actors as mentors or parental figures, such revelations could be particularly impactful. Emotional bonds formed over years of working together often blurred the line between professional collaboration and personal attachment, making interpersonal changes more difficult to navigate. Over time, however, many of these strained relationships evolved toward reconciliation. As the series ended and years passed, distance allowed for reflection and healing in several cases. The emotional complexity of these relationships adds another layer to the legacy of the show, illustrating how long-term creative projects can deeply intertwine with personal lives. Themes, risks, and groundbreaking storytelling. Despite its reputation for warmth and nostalgia, Little House on the Prairie frequently addressed difficult and sometimes controversial subjects. The series explored themes such as racism, disability, addiction, poverty, and abuse, often at a time when family-oriented television avoided such topics. This willingness to engage with serious issues distinguished it from many contemporaries. Episodes frequently placed characters in morally complex situations that required difficult choices rather than simple resolutions. By doing so, the show encouraged audiences to consider perspectives outside their own experiences. This approach gave the series a level of emotional depth that extended beyond its historical setting. While some episodes were more controversial than others, the show's commitment to realism and moral inquiry helped establish it as more than just a nostalgic family drama. It became a platform for storytelling that balanced entertainment with social awareness, contributing to its lasting cultural relevance. Legacy of a town that refused to fade quietly. The destruction of Walnut Grove remains one of television's most unforgettable finales, but its significance goes beyond shock value. It represents the end of a long-running emotional journey that connected audiences to a fictional community for nearly a decade. Whether viewed as symbolic closure or excessive finality, it ensured that the series would not fade gently into obscurity. More than 40 years later, Little House on the Prairie continues to be discussed, revisited, and analyzed. Its legacy is shaped not only by its storytelling but also by its willingness to evolve, confront difficult themes, and ultimately end on its own dramatic terms. The decision to destroy Walnut Grove became a defining metaphor for letting go of a world that had run its course. In the end, the series endures because it captured something universal about human experience: the balance between hardship and hope, community and loss, beginnings and endings. Walnut Grove may have been reduced to rubble, but its memory remains firmly intact in television history, continuing to resonate with audiences long after its final broadcast. The cultural aftershock and enduring memory of Walnut Grove. The conclusion of Little House on the Prairie did not simply mark the end of a television series, it created a cultural aftershock that lingered far beyond its final broadcast. Few shows of its era had built such a sustained emotional relationship with audiences, and fewer still had chosen to end in such a visually and symbolically dramatic way. The destruction of Walnut Grove in The Last Farewell transformed what could have been a quiet farewell into a moment of television history that viewers continued to discuss, debate, and reinterpret for decades. Part of the reason this ending resonated so strongly is that it disrupted expectations. Audiences who had come to associate the series with moral lessons, emotional warmth, and gradual storytelling were suddenly confronted with finality in its most irreversible form. The explosion of the town functioned as both narrative closure and emotional rupture, forcing viewers to reconcile their attachment to a fictional place with its permanent erasure. That tension between comfort and shock is what gave the ending its lasting power. Over time, the memory of Walnut Grove evolved into something larger than the show itself. It became a reference point in discussions about how television series should end, how long-running stories manage closure, and whether destruction can serve as a meaningful metaphor for change. Even viewers who had not watched every season understood the significance of the finale, because it represented a rare moment when a fictional world was deliberately and completely brought to an end. The legacy of that decision continues to shape how the series is remembered today. Rather than fading into the background of television history, Little House on the Prairie remains anchored by its final image of destruction and departure. That contrast between its gentle storytelling and its explosive ending ensures that Walnut Grove persists not just as a setting from a bygone show, but as a lasting symbol of how endings can be as powerful as beginnings.